Everyone called him the old man. But Richard Harrison was having a terrible time behind the cameras. His wife is now suing their own son for $500,000 in lost cash. And the bad news is coming out. Rick Harrison, did he really lie to his mother while she was passed out? Before he died, did the old man know about the betrayal? Today, you'll be shocked by the truth about TV's favorite pawn shop family. Rick Harrison Jr. was born in Danville, Virginia, in 1941. He is best known as the old man from Pawn Stars. His family moved to Lexington, North Carolina, when he was only 1 year old. They lived in a simple house at 115 Peacock Avenue that showed they were from the working class. His dad worked hard to support the family as a welder and a builder. Richard learned early on that he had to work hard to make ends meet. He dropped off kids at school and picked them up early every morning when he was 14. This is something most teens wouldn't do. He left the bus at his house all night and made around $5 or $6 a week that way. It wasn't much, but his family really appreciated it. He wasn't very interested in school. He went to Lexington High School, but quit when he was a junior. Because of money problems at home, it was clear that getting a job was more important than finishing school. His life changed quickly when he was 17. At a barn dance, he met Joanne Rue. That night would change his whole life. It was around the same time that he stole a car and got caught, which could have been the end of his career. He was in front of a judge and was told he could either go to jail or join the service. It was simple to decide. In October 1958, he joined the U.S. Navy, a choice that would make everything different. He had planned to serve for 4 years, but things did not go as planned. He married Joanne after 2 years of service. Soon after, Sherry, their first child, was born. She had Down syndrome and needed a lot of expensive medical care. Richard re-enlisted, which meant he would be in the Navy longer, so his daughter could get the care she needed. He worked on 4 different ships over the next 20 years. He worked his way up and became a first-class petty officer. He had to do work all the way across the Pacific. He first worked on ships like the USS Orleck and the USS Twining. Later, he joined Tactical Air Control Squadron 21, where he was in charge of air operations. From 1971 to 1975, he held the most important job on the USS Chewanik. During that time, he was sent to Vietnam more than once and received several awards, including the Good Conduct Medal and the Vietnam Service Medal. Even though he did well, the Navy kept him away from home for long amounts of time. He was at sea for almost half of his job, which meant he missed out on important time with his family. In 1979, when he had 3 teenage sons living with him, he made a choice. He got out of the military after 20 years of service. Richard Harrison and his wife Joanna went to San Diego with the goal of making their lives better. They worked hard to start a real estate business and even open their own office. There was a time when things looked good. After being successful, things went badly when the economy crashed in the early 1980s. Mortgage rates went through the roof and hit 18%, which caused a problem in the housing market. The Harrisons put a lot of money into real estate because they thought it would protect their future. They lost almost $1 million instead. They might have broken if they lost everything, but Harrison wouldn't give up. In later years, he said that his time in the Navy taught him to be tough and work hard. He was sure they had to start over, even if it meant leaving San Diego. They moved to Las Vegas in April 1981, with only $5,000 left in their bank account. It wasn't a move full of hope. It was a last-ditch effort. Even though Las Vegas wasn't the busy place it would become, Harrison saw what it could be. He thought they would be able to start over. He and his son Rick opened a small used store called Gold and Silver Coin Shop soon after they got there. It was only 300 square feet, which wasn't even enough to run a business. They set up shop on South Las Vegas Boulevard and did everything they could to get people to come in. Things didn't start going well right away, though. It was hard to get money. Rick ran the shop during the day and repossessed cars at night to support his family. The Harrisons refused to let the business fail, even though it had a rough start. In 1986, the small store was too small for them, so they moved to a bigger one. He and Rick had bigger plans, though. It was very hard to get a pawn license in Las Vegas for a long time. The city had strict rules about how many could be given out, but Rick paid close attention. He kept track of population growth by calling city officials on a daily basis. He knew that as the city grew, more licenses would become available. It paid off for him to wait. After years of hard work, they finally got one of Las Vegas's highly sought-after pawn licenses in 1989. They opened a gold and silver exchange shop the next year at 713 Las Vegas Boulevard South, which is only 2 miles from the Strip. The time and place were perfect. Around $3 million was loaned out every year by 2005, and the shop made $700,000 in interest. Things were going well with business, but it wasn't easy to get there. There were so many pawn shops in Las Vegas that it was hard to choose one. A lot of people thought the business was sketchy, full of companies that ripped off customers. The Harrisons knew they had to get people to trust them. Rick had studied history and old things for years. The shop was better because of what he knew. He could see important things that other people missed. They didn't just deal in gold, jewelry, and technology like most pawn shops do. They became known for also dealing in rare collectibles and historical items. That was what made them unique. Trust was just as important as having things in stock. Customers liked how fair the Harrisons were, which made them stick with them. The shop was well known in Las Vegas by the early 2000s. People who lost money at casinos often pawned their goods to get home. People who collect rare things came in. Some people were only interested in what kinds of goods were inside. The shop's unique items got even more unique over time. Some of the things they bought and sold were Roman coins, samurai swords, and even Brock Williams' Super Bowl ring from the 2001 New England Patriots. By 2010, the shop had become a place that everyone had to go. There were a lot of tourists and fans in the store every day. They had to keep growing because demand was so high. The store had grown to over 15,000 square feet by October of that year. At the Las Vegas Gold and Silver Pawn Shop in 2003, something strange took place. In one episode of the late-night show Insomniac with Dave Attell, the shop was shown. Most people thought it was just a short piece about a strange business. For Rick Harrison, though, it was more than that. He had been trying for years to get TV stations to agree that a show about his pawn shop would be a good idea. He thought that the unique things that came in and the daily deals that were made would interest a lot of people. But people in charge of the network didn't see it that way. Someone even told him that no one would watch 4 fat guys in a pawn shop. That showing on Insomniac showed that it wasn't true. TV directors were interested and thought it could be a good idea for a show. They saw that it wasn't just a pawn shop, a place with a lot of history, interesting things, and strong people. Rick, his dad Richard, Harrison, his son Corey, and their longtime friend Chumlee were a fun group to hang out with. They had a lot of tension and knew a lot about rare items. Things didn't quite come together until 2008, but by that time the idea had taken shape. The show would be mostly about the shop's past, negotiations, and how the family works together. That's what it was called at first. Was interested, but the name didn't seem right. With a play on words that was catchy, they changed the name to Pawn Stars. The first episode aired on July 19, 2009. It became the most watched show on the History Channel in just 10 weeks. Jersey Shore was the only reality show in the country with more viewers. The Gold and Silver Pawn Shop would never be the same after Pawn Stars became famous. Before the show, about 70 people came there every day. That number had shot through the roof to over 1,000 by October 2010. To see the shop, meet the cast, and maybe even buy something, people came from all over the world. The show went around the world and was shown in over 150 countries and turned into 38 languages. Richard Harrison, who was better known as the Old Man, had one of the most recognized faces on the show. He was born in Danville, Virginia, on March 4, 1941. He was in the Navy for more than 20 years before he became a pawn shop owner. He and Rick opened the Las Vegas Gold and Silver Pawn Shop in 1989. Richard was known for being straightforward even before the show. Because he was always serious, people called him the Old Man when he was only 38 years old. He became a fan favorite on screen. He was tough, smart, and always ready to say when a deal was bad. He often didn't agree with Corey and Chumlee about what they did, but that made the show more fun. He seemed grumpy, but he really cared about the business and the people who worked there. Also, Richard really liked old cars a lot. He showed off many on the show over the years, but one, a 1966 Imperial Crown, stood out. His family gave him a fully repaired version of the car as a surprise for their 50th wedding anniversary. This was one of the few times a man who rarely showed feeling broke down in tears. There was more to Richard Harrison than just being on TV. He was married, had children, and was a grandfather. He was the rock on which his family stood through all of life's challenges. Richard got married to Joanne Rue in 1960, a woman who would be his partner for almost 60 years. The people in Joanne's family were very close. Her dad was a county judge and then worked as a lead lawyer for Philip Morris. Even though Joanne came from a wealthy family, her life with Richard was not easy or privileged. They had problems that put them to the test in ways that not many couples do. Their first child, a girl named Sherry, was born with Down syndrome. They had a hard time raising a child with special needs, but they loved her very much. They will always have a hole in their hearts from when she died when she was 6 years old. Richard and Joanne had 3 more children: Rick, Joseph Kent, and Christopher Keith. Life kept throwing problems in their way, and at one point, they had to make some tough choices because they were having trouble with money. Richard had been in the Navy for more than 20 years, which was a stable job. After leaving the service, though, it was unclear. Joanne got her real estate license so that she could help her family make ends meet. Richard worked for any company that would hire him. They didn't have much money, but they never gave up. In the late 1980s, Richard and his oldest son Rick chose to take a chance. In 1989, they opened the Las Vegas pawn shop for gold and silver. It started out as a small business run by a family. Not very fancy, but it was built with Richard's strict morals of honesty and hard work in mind. When it came to business, he was very smart and always did things the right way. That meant there were no easy ways out, no handouts, and no time to be lazy. He was very careful in the shop, just like he was in the Navy, and it paid off. Richard was always a tough guy. He was known for being straightforward even before everyone called him the old man. The way they felt got worse over time. Because of how rough he was and how old-fashioned he thought, people called him that when he was only 38 years old. He didn't think things should be brushed off. He told them they had to work hard, do the right thing, and deal with their own issues. He took that way of thinking with him to the pawn shop, where he quickly became known for being a great negotiator. They would know right away if someone came into his shop, try to pull a fast one, because he had seen it all. Richard could be strict, but the people who knew him best knew he had another side. He loved his family very much and wasn't just a trader. He had a very strong bond with Rick. Every day, they built the business together. When Pawn Stars first came out in 2009, their friendship was the most important thing about the show. People saw how they joked around with each other, fought sometimes, and clearly respected each other. Richard was more than just a TV star. He was also a role model for his son. Rick learned everything he knew about business from him, and he kept those lessons with him the whole time. Also, Richard really liked old cars a lot. For 15 years, he carefully waited for the owner to sell the 1966 Imperial Crown that he really wanted. It wasn't just another business deal when the deal finally went through. Years later, Rick and his son Corey surprised him with a fully repaired car for their 50th wedding anniversary. It was one of the few times Richard couldn't say anything. That moment showed how much his family meant to a man who didn't show his feelings very often. The Harrison family was hit with more tragedy when Richard's middle son, Joseph Kent, died. It was already terrible to lose a child once. That was something that no parent should ever have to go through. But Richard stood strong as always. He didn't break down in sadness. He instead thought about the family he still had and made sure they always stayed together. Behind the scenes, things were getting harder, even though he looked as sharp as ever on TV. Harrison was told he has Parkinson's disease, a brain problem that makes it hard to move, balance, and even speak. At first, he didn't tell anyone about his illness because he didn't want sympathy or special care. He went to work, filmed episodes, and did what he always did. Ran the pawn shop and made sure his family followed the rules. But Parkinson's keeps coming back. He found it harder and harder to hide how the cancer was making him look over time. His hands started to shake, and he moved more slowly. It got tiring to do simple things. His loud voice got weaker over time because of the long days of shooting. He kept going as long as he could because he didn't want the cancer to define him. From 2016 to 2017, Harrison's health got worse to the point where he had to quit Pawn Star. Things got even worse after he had a stroke, so he chose to quit. It wasn't simple to decide. For almost 30 years, he worked at the shop. The show made him famous in a way he never thought possible. That being said, his body just couldn't keep up with the busy routine. Fans noticed that he wasn't around and wondered about his health, but not many people knew how badly he was hurting. He stayed active in the business while he was sick, giving Rick and Corey advice and making sure the shop ran the way he wanted it to. Richard Harrison died on June 25, 2018. He was 77 years old. He died peacefully with his family by his side. Fans were very sad to hear that he had died. Rick Harrison wrote a sad message on Instagram to let everyone know. The old man died this morning after a long fight with Parkinson's. I love you, Dad. We'll see you next time. In a separate statement, the gold and silver pawn shop said that Harrison had spent his last days with loved family. The answer came right away. Fans paid tribute to the man who had entertained them for almost a decade by posting their best moments from Pawn Stars and talking about him. People left flowers, notes, and other small gifts in his famous chair in the shop, which was used as a tribute. Harrison had an effect on people that could not be denied. He was more than just a reality TV star. He stood for old-fashioned ideals, hard work, and being honest. His family was heartbroken, but the love from friends helped them feel better. Rick wrote several messages to his dad and called him my hero, and telling everyone thanks for their help. I learned a lot from my grandfather, Corey Harrison said. He had worked with his grandfather for more than 15 years. He was more than just Corey's grandpa. He was also his teacher and best friend. Austin Chumley Russell also shared his thoughts. He talked about how Harrison could be both serious and funny at the same time. Harrison was recognized by the History Channel with a special show called A Treasure Remembered, which showed some of his favorite scenes from the show's more than 500 episodes. It was the right way to honor a man who had shaped the show from the start. Fans saw him use his wittiest one-liners and hardest negotiating skills one last time. A reminder of how smart and funny he was, which made him famous. When Richard Harrison died in 2018, it was a loss for more than just his family. It showed deep cracks that had been forming for years below the surface. On TV, the family business looked like it was doing well, but there were problems going on behind the scenes that would later lead to lawsuits, claims, and nasty fights over money and power. Things took a very different turn in February 2022. Joan Harrison, who was married to Richard Harrison, sued her own son, Rick Harrison. She said that while she was coming out of a coma in 2000 or 2001, Rick tricked her into giving up most of her share in the gold and silver pawn shop. Joanne says that she didn't know what she was agreeing to at the time. After a heated fight with Rick, when she finally knew what had happened, it was too late. Even more shocking information came out in the case. Joanne got Richard's 49% share of the business when he died. This made her the full owner of the shop. But she said Rick wouldn't give her the financial records and stopped giving her money every month to cover her living costs. In the beginning, he gave her $25,000 every month. He later lowered it to $20,000, and the payouts will stop in 2020. Joanne also said that Rick had kept more than $500,000 in metal and cash that Richard had saved before he died. Rick said nothing was true. He was adamant that his mother wasn't acting on her own, but was being controlled by people who wanted to take advantage of the situation. The court case did not end there, though. The fight got worse the next month, in March 2022, when Joanne asked for a temporary protection order against Rick. While the case was still going on, she didn't want him to move or hide family property. Fan had always thought the Harrison family was one big happy family. The fight shocked them. Pawn Stars have been one of the most popular reality TV shows for years, and the Harrisons were a big part of that. But this case showed that behind the scenes, things were not all good. The family had been sued before, so this wasn't the first time. A Vietnam veteran with disabilities called Daniel Callahan sued both Richard and Rick Harrison in May 2012. He said they hit him at the gold and silver pawn shop in late 2011 while they were arguing about a gun he brought in to be appraised. Callahan said he took a Model 96B firearm to the store hoping to get a good deal on it. But things got worse very quickly. He was choked and dragged out of the store. He said that they threw him, his gun, and his cane onto the ground. He said that his things were ruined and that he got hurt badly enough that he needed medical help. He wanted $20,000 in damages to pay for his hospital bills and lawyers' fees. That day's events were described in a disturbing way in the lawsuit, but Corey Harrison, also known as Big Hoss, stepped in to protect his family. He said that the claims were not true at all. He said that Rick and Richard were not even in the shop when the incident happened. Based on what Corey said, Callahan became hostile while holding the gun, so security had to take him out of the shop to protect everyone. More people than ever watched the show. Fans were split. Some people thought the Harrisons were telling the truth when they said the case was just an attempt to get money from a strong business. Others were unhappy with how the situation was managed and wondered if the pawn shop had the right safety measures in place. In either case, the controversy hurt the show's image. But cases weren't the only thing that made Pawn Stars interesting. Things were also very tense behind the scenes, but most people didn't know about them. The main cast of the show seemed to get along well on screen, but there were growing fights over money and fame. A few cast members thought that Rick Harrison was getting all the attention and credit, even though other people had just as much to do with the show's success. People other than the group were also upset. Crew members and story writers who worked on the show also said they felt like they were being treated unfairly. Many writers for reality TV shows were paid a lot less than writers for written TV shows. The Writers Guild of America East did a poll and found that Pawn Stars writers made about $2,136 a week. On the other hand, writers for written TV shows could make up to $6,712 a week for doing the same work. There were other problems besides wage disagreements. More and more people started to wonder how real everything was as the show got bigger. Some viewers thought they were watching a real look at how a real pawn shop worked when they first started watching Pawn Stars. Later, though, it was said that many of the deals seen on the show were fake. A lot of the time, sellers were picked ahead of time, and negotiations were planned ahead of time to make the shows more interesting. Reality TV shows often show things like this, but it made some watchers feel like they were lied to. Pawn Stars had built its image for years on the idea that it showed a family business without any scripts. But as more of these stories came out, the show's carefully created image started to break.